It's a new dawn, it's a new day, but no one warned us. For me, it feels like I've had a mistress for the last 20, maybe even 21 years. She's always been there, a rock who has taught me so much about who I am, what I do. She's put me firmly on a path. She's felt kind of frowsy and outdated at points, but she's always been there. And suddenly, she's just gone. Not so much as a note, not even a squeezed out tube of toothpaste. We've been ghosted. I am, of course, talking about the... what? The EXS24, and I think I'm right in saying it's the Mark II, although I never used the Mark I, nor indeed have I met anyone who did. This really changed everything up, and certainly was the reason why I switched from Cubase. My history as a DAW user was Cubeat on an Atari 1040 ST. I switched to a Mac Proforma with Cubase on, or Cubase Audio, as I think it was called then. And it's kind of interesting because it was, DAWs were like samplers. You were Emu or Akai, and you were Cubase or C-Lab, which then became eMagic Logic. And it was the EXS24 that made a lot of people migrate. For many people, before DAWs went into the kind of land of audio, you'd use them simply as sequencers, MIDI sequencers that would trigger samplers. And a lot of dance tracks in those days just used samplers. They didn't use multi-track at all. So part of the process, I remember doing a track with Ministry of Sound, was sitting down and the task and process of maybe cracking open a box of floppy disks. iOmega, this company who specialised in storage devices over SCSI, which is this enormous kind of underwater cabling system, they came up with, was it the Jazz drive first and then the zip drive? I think you could get up to like maybe 256 megabytes. Then in the larger Akais and Emus, as they evolved, they had these internal hard drives, which I think a lot of people really struggled to get their heads around, because here was this external piece of outboard, but with an internal unremovable drive that didn't really store enough stuff on. And I think the attraction of computers with sampling was that you could attach a hard drive to the computer, but also remove it. If computers were good at one thing, that was folder structures, filing systems. I'll never forget having a little Nancy round with the EXS24, convinced I would never truly abandon my Emu. And it only took an afternoon to immediately turn my back on outboard samplers. Hard drives have become cheaper and cheaper. Storage has become more possible over the years. So I don't know if I'm alone here. My folder structure is basically an evolution of myself as a composer over the last 20, 21 years. It's kind of extraordinary, really. I mean, if we just look into my projects folder, this is my theme to Top Gear, which they're still using today. Tutankhamun, which I did the fly on the wall thing. Here's some violin licks from Anna Phoebe. Triangle was the first time I worked with the singer Dot Allison, and We Got Married. Wild Bill, that was Dexter Fletcher's first film. Inside Number 9 started in 2015. Job I Was Fired Off, Fresh Meat, and here's a few bits and bobs from Alien Isolation. But also arguably the more successful enterprise that I've been involved with, and that's sampling. I've always had my drums and percussions organised, my construction kits here. You know, it's interesting to look back through my life living in Soho from 2002 until at least 2010, and basically I'd go into a record shop from time to time, and I learned how to import from CD, and I could spot where there are individual drum hits. And back in the day when I was being booked for jobs as a kind of trendy person, BT Beat's there, and it's all over Top Gear. I was using that, you know, decades before actually meeting BT and then working with him for the first time. And CH Sessions, this is when I started actually investing in sessions, and it seemed so ridiculous at the time. All of the mixing bowls that Joe and I recorded over the years. Toot trumpets, that became our trumpet fields. That was an experiment for Tutankhamun that we didn't end up using. Scary Strings was that weird experiment I did, and that inspired Evo grids, the work that we've done with Olafur Arnolds, the work we've done with Eric Whitaker. I think it's tough. A project that I walked off, and here are the Arctic strings, which then became Frozen Strings, which then inspired not only Tundra but Neo. The real key sample is in my guitars, Peel guitar, which is available on Labs, but I guess the biggie's the Chirango, and that's what started the entire Spitfire journey. The thing that drew me over to EXS was not the functionality, was not the ease of use. You know, you developed a muscle memory for outboard samplers. It was simply the folder structure, and it's extraordinary to be here this day when EXS24 is no more. I do genuinely feel quite emotional about this. I didn't kind of realise that it would always be there, this Bayo tapestry of sampling. And I think if I have one regret, is I never worked out what the fuck this was all about. It's always been so confusing for me. Basically, I believe in order to upgrade my Logic to 2.10.5, I've got to kind of go up to Catalina. So I've actually done that with this computer here. I always go up an operating system first on my laptops. So basically, after doing breakfast with my kids, I'll come back and just do a first look of Logic. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I can see as being designed to compete with Ableton, possibly all sorts of live looping, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not going to look at that stuff because I can't make comparisons because I'm not yet an Ableton user, but I will have a first look at the new EXS24 or whatever they've called it, just to really get to grips with the fact that we're safe. We've got everything that we had in EXS24 and what stuff there is to look forward to. Let's have a look at this then. When it comes to operating systems and new versions of workhorses, always test it out on this first just to see what kind of disruption it's going to cause. And I've got the original EXS24 up there. So let's have a look if there's any kind of massive change in the look of Logic Pro. It's not only the same, it's actually identical. So there is absolutely no change. That's really surprising. I remember back in the day, they used to change it all the time, and you used to be able to skin it as well. It doesn't seem to be huge. It was studio horns and studio strings there before. I'm not sure. Should check those out. But everything else looks pretty much as it was. So let's have a look at the old ES1. Yeah. And it's funny, you can see that the resolution for these things are such that they're actually tiny now. So let's just have a look at, I guess it's multi-sample sampler. I think what I'll miss is calling it something. So this is EXS format, and I imagine this is probably a calculated decision by Apple to just everything's in the Logic ecoverse. So it's not what samplers that for or what format. It just all works in Logic. And as for the look, no, I'm not going to do that thing that John Cassavetes does in Rosemary's Baby when she gets her haircut. It goes, did you pay for that? So it has a very modern, non-skeuomorph look about it. At first glance, looks very, very different. Looks like we're full of all sorts of features that the original didn't have. Now, if I click on these, it's not dissimilar to Contact in the sense of it is a kind of a stacked modular thing. So this very much appears, if we roll this down, to basically be this part of the interface. So we have not one but two filters, which is interesting, and you can have them either kind of hardwired, one, then two, or layered and blend between them. So that's going to be interesting to have some fun with. And something I'm very interested in is voices. We used to only be able to go up to 64, I believe. Could you go any higher? No, 64 as high as you could go, and that would demonstrate the number that were used. So polyphony. So it's interesting that we're saying voices here and then used here, but we're saying polyphony here and used here. So I presume this is voice polyphony. That's got more. No, so it goes up to 99. So it's still very much kind of purposely limiting. Okay, so that's that bit there. So I wonder if we can do it. Yes, we can. So this modular matrix, I guess, is this part here, the bit that I never understood. However, this kind of list format does make a lot more sense. And then you can add and minus. So basically, you've got the possibility of a controller controlling the source modulator, which affects the target. So I've been using this for 21 years and I couldn't figure it out. And then we have the modulators, which again, I never understood these, but I do now. Yeah, I didn't realize that you could actually sync that to tempo before. Amazing by upgrading how much you can learn about something that is about to be usurped. Let me just go back as well. I just want to go back to these filters. I've just noticed that this word lush looks like they've got more different types of filters as well. Creamy sounds interesting. Gritty. I've worked with people who work with Tom Waits, and I don't know if this is apocryphal, but apparently he has a mixing desk with a fader on that says hair, and will often just say, "This mix needs more hair." I've always wanted a filter with hair on it. Okay, so let's look at the mapping. Now, I've spent a lot of time in here, and again, this looks very similar. We've got our group, so if we go to edit, oh, gotcha, group, zone. Right, and this is just back to safety land. So, and then this is your mapping editor, and then IC. So your zone is basically your wave editor. So basically, before you used to basically do that, and then it would open that in Logic. So this is just keep housing it all within the sampler. Now, there is some interesting stuff that I've not seen before. Is these split options, auto map. It's got a few more options. Pitch detection being one of them. Remap, auto loop. Auto always makes things easier, but never better. And optimize loop crossfades. So these are quite a lot of things to look into, right loops and right mapping. All unfamiliar terminology for me, so but just some very interesting tools. But it doesn't look to be too steep a learning curve. I guess the thing that I'm going to struggle with is muscle memory, but basically the fundamentals of EXS being basically a fancy spreadsheet remain, which is great. And you'll notice that the sounds are now coming up here, not in the synth browser. So that is all intact. So we're going in there, Luth. Now, how do we go back? Oh, I see. No. Okay, that's interesting. So that's going to take some getting used to, because that was trying to load that. I guess the one thing that no one has ever mentioned about EXS24 is the collaborative nature of it. Collaborative workflows, I think, are very rarely prescribed. They're usually evolved. And what will happen is that people will gravitate towards things that can be shared easily, EXS being one of those. So I have a number of people who are friends, and we'll just exchange samples. And I don't ever recall having heard of someone who's given someone else an EXS24 file and it won't load because of some kind of version issue. And I know people who really stick around on very, very old versions of Logic. My brother and his partner Alexis being a good example of that. You know, they'll work on Assassin's Creed for maybe 2.5 years. I'm often flim-flamming them EXS files, and there's never been we don't have that version of Logic. So I wonder whether there will be that issue here. It might be worth, before upgrading the operating system on my main rig and indeed the version of Logic, to see how, for example, EXS24 handles the multiple filters, stuff like that are being spat out by this new Logic sampler. So it seems, after all, that I haven't been ghosted. EXS24 has simply had a makeover, and it's something that I look forward to diving into soon. So it would be churlish not to subscribe if you haven't done already, because there's going to be loads coming up soon. Best ding that bell to be notified the next time I put a video up. And one of those for EXS24 Mark II and the 21 years of service you gave us. I salute you.